Take 3. Welcome to my world. Can that? Right, let's do it again. Take 4. Good morning, good evening. Take 5. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to my world. My name is Duncan Cabassi and I'm the Australasian NMRA Division 1 Superintendent. Today my part of this program is you're going to do a layout tour of my layout, the Union Pacific Burlington Northern Santa Fe Joint Division, and that's a hell of a mouthful, so from now on let's just call it the JD. I started this layout back in 2006 and it is housed across 2 separate garages. One's a 2-car garage, that's what we're sitting in at the moment, and the other garage is a 3-car garage which is attached to the house. I have some unique engineering designs on this layout to actually make those connections work, because the connections are removable, so I can close the garages. I put the modules up when we hold operating sessions, to which is where I get probably the most enjoyment out of this hobby. Is I built this layout for operations and I just love seeing people run this railroad like the real railroad. The prototype I model, I'm a prototype modeler, is from Portland, Oregon to parts north of Spokane, the old Union Pacific old Washi line. And for those of you that are familiar with the area, there are some scenes on this layout that I've tried to give prototype authenticity to. I wouldn't say I've done an absolute scratch built things that are exactly like what's in the real place, but certainly names of towns, locations of towns, and also signage on the layout are all taken from the real industries, etc. in those areas in the real world. The layout is 57 foot by 30 foot, and we're about to take you on a journey.
Dispatch, this is Santa Fe 563. We need to go to Marshall from Yardley West. Thank you.
So you're waiting for me, right?
No.
We're waiting for the wrong train.
Yeah, we're coming in.
We're waiting for them to come in. It's not just me then.
I'll wait for you.
I can't get out.
Probably more effective guard dog than now too. They look easy to be
Wiki and Dad don't do anything to them.
Right, Bruce.
Yeah, you're clear. They'll come in on the other line.
So I can run forward a bit.
Yeah, you're clear to go forward, mate.
We're coming on the back line.
You'll come in on the other main.
So you're coming out on this track, right? Oh, okay. Right. So you're coming down that. Right, so I can go up to yard limit
No, but we need the other road to get around. Oh, sorry, dispatch the room for.
So we have to come in on that arrival track, Duncan.
They're already consistent. Can you move yours? So all you need to do is dial up to 9704. Just do the back and forth. Because that was now clean.
Marina to dispatch.
Dispatch, Marina.
Dispatch, just letting you know, Peruna is just exiting the helix down, coming over the flat.
Yeah, Perina, you're clear through Boardman.
Thanks, dispatch, we're okay.
No, you're going back where you were, Trip. Didn't get far. That was the problem. Slowly heat up, that's where you're at. We'll start the journey on the Union Pacific Burlington Northern Santa Fe Joint Division layout on the lower deck at Western Staging. Now, Western Staging on my layout represents 2 yards in Portland, Oregon. 1 yard being the Union Pacific Albina yard and the other yard being Burlington Northern Santa Fe Lakes Yard. In this staging yard I have 4 21-foot 6-inch tracks, or in metric terms 6.5 metres. There is 5 10-foot tracks, in metric terms 3.5 metres, and there are 3 13-foot tracks, in metric terms 4.5 metres long. The staging tracks are not divided to represent Lakes Road on one side and Albina Yard on the other side. During an operating session, the operators are instructed that if they have a long train, they are to take the next longest track that will accommodate their train. This way we don't have the event where the 52-car coal train comes in and there are only short tracks left. So any train that is running eastbound will depart out of this yard, and from here they will follow the main line to Boardman, which is the next major town on the layout. Now those of you who know the area will say, what about the Dells? What about Hood River? And probably a couple other places in between. The reality is I have not modelled that part of the Union Pacific line along the Columbia River yet, i.e. watch this space. It is my intent that at some stage I will have the Dells and I will have Hood River represented on the layout. But for now, basically trains depart Portland and they head to Boardman. Just for a little bit of future reference, so you can all understand geographically where things are located on the model, I'm going to go up to the upper deck. West staging sits below Yardley Yard on the upper deck. So Yardley Yard is in Spokane, and we'll focus on this later on during this tour, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a insight into it now. And just if I pan around a bit, you can now get a feel for where west staging actually sits. Remembering that this layout is spread across two separate garages, rooms, whatever you want to call them, and I'm currently in the external garage, or the one that's not connected to the house. Well, that covers off on west staging. So now we've covered off on west staging, let's tour the main line. Departing west staging, trains will leave and head out of this layout room to the house garage. I have a big long sweeping S-curve here that goes through a hole in the wall. Everybody has to have a hole in the wall, don't they? So coming out of the hole in the wall, as you can see, we're pretty much bathed in bright sunlight here today. It is sunny Queensland. This is on the lower deck, and these are the removable modules. Okay, so you can see the upper deck there. Just so happens that there's a director's special. They've pulled up on the upper deck to take some photos of the Snake River, but let's just focus on the lower deck for now. That will eventually have basically a cliff face on the backside of the tracks. What I've tried to model here is concrete mainline and swinging around. Now this is my latest project area. I'm starting to work on scenery in this area. These what started out as styrofoam blocks now represent the basalt cliffs along the Columbia River. The main line follows along there. Into Nally Bay. There's a boat ramp there. I don't know what's happened to the trailer that car was towing. I think he might have lost it into Nally Bay. The next part of this, or the next phase of this project, is to do the township of Boardman. So the town of Boardman, the track in front here, right in the foreground, is the branch line going up to Boardman branch, which actually goes out to a power station, a coal-fired power station in the area, and I model that. We'll cover off on that bit in a latter part of the journey. We come back into the industries of Boardman. We have Conagra Foods, which is a potato chip frozen potato factory. There's a yard in Boardman, so during operating sessions, trains are made up here, or locals are made up here, and they go out and they switch out the industries in Boardman, delivering empties and loads, whatever is required as per the switch list program, and then The manifest trains that come through the town pick up those pickups that are going to other areas of the world. Treadit, it's actually a real industry in Boardman. Phillips Plywood, not. It's named after one of the gentlemen, a very good friend of mine, Trevor Phillips, who's helped me on the layout. A layout this size, you certainly need people helping you. I'd say that I've probably done 90% of the work, but certainly the other 10% has been done by some key people who are great friends and great modellers. So there's a spiral. It takes us up to the upper deck on the outskirts of Boardman. This spiral is aptly named Spiral. Funny that. Now we're going up to the upper deck. That bridge will go in there sooner or later. And we're coming into Wallula. Wallula is the next switching area on the layout. On the outskirts of Wallula we have the Speciality Minerals and Boys Cascade Paper Plant, which are actually in Wallula. As I said, I'm a prototype modeller, so I have tried to model the real industries that are in the areas of each town. Here there's a fairly substantial container yard that is mostly taking products from the paper plant and distributing them again to other parts of the world. There's a yard in Wallula and it operates the same as Boardman. Manifests drop off and pick up blocks of cars, and the locals grab the blocks of cars that are dropped off and switch out the industries and bring back blocks of cars to be put onto manifests when they arrive, to be distributed to wherever they're going. Now, Wallula and Boardman, there's a bit of a story behind them. They were a part of a show layout that I participated on with a few other people. A gentleman by the name of Gary Paper did a lot of this work on these modules, so I can't take claim for everything here. Gary is an absolutely wonderful modeller. He's very skillful and has access to some tools that us mere mortals don't have, given that he's a cabinet maker, joiner by trade. But his modelling and what he's done here is second to none, and I thank him dearly for what he's put into this layout. From Wallula, the main line leaves and heads eastbound, goes past one last industry. That's Tyson Foods, which is a meatworks. We depart Wallula on a single track main line, cross a highway overpass, and then we're into country Oregon again. This here, once I've done the scene, is just going to be some farmland. We're crossing a small river that feeds the Snake River here. Around a nice sweeping S-curve, and we start to hit the basalt cliffs again that are along the Snake River, much the same as the Columbia River. Lovely, beautiful, sunshiny day here, and wow, The UP director's train is still sitting there allowing all the passengers to take photos of the Snake River. So this is my representation of Yoso Trestle. I don't know whether I've done it justice or not because Yoso Trestle is a significantly longer trestle, but modeller's license, so I've tried to compress it, and yeah, it's not finished yet. It's got a long way to go, obviously. It's still white styrofoam, and the trestle bents aren't fully attached, but that'll be probably one of my next projects that I'm going to get onto. We come off Yoso Trestle. Now we're heading back into the standalone garage again on the removable modules, and then we go back into the main layout room. The line comes out of a tunnel with a snow shed and curves around. The river represents Palouse River, and there's a branch line that takes off here and goes to a coal mine. Given that I work in the coal industry, I had to represent a coal mine on the layout. Don't hold that against me. All you environmentalists out there, coal isn't as bad as what everybody makes it out to be. Following the scene. So the coal mine's on the opposite side of the backdrop, and on this side I've modelled a power plant. That's Hopper Junction. Now the branch line that goes to the coal mine actually comes out at the power plant and vice versa, so I have a loads in, empties out operation that happens during a operating session. The main line is now coming up to Summit, where it reaches the bridge, crosses the bridge, so we do a 90-degree turn here at sorry, 180-degree turn here on a peninsula. The radius of the turn is about 550 millimeters in metric terms. I'm thinking that that's probably about 28 inches imperial, which is quite a large radius when you're talking N scale. And we're coming into the town of Cheney. And this is actually a really neat spot to do take photos from during op sessions, and you get the nice sweeping S curves. Again, Cheney, like the other towns, has a little small yard for drop-offs of block, lots of cars. Has some significant industries in Cheney. There's a Cement West, which is a limestone crushing plant. Then there's Yonkins Brewing there in the background, Ord Industries in the foreground, again named after one of the guys who's contributed to this layout. And then the ADM milling here in the foreground is actually, there is an ADM milling in Cheney, and in actual fact doesn't look unlike what I've modelled there. So small Amtrak station, and over in the background is Yonkins Brewing. Now, Yonkins Brewing is named after one of my great model railroad buddies in the United States, Jim Yonkins, who has a magnificent layout in his own right, the Mud Bay and Southern, and yeah, I cannot speak highly enough of Jim as a human being, let alone a modeller. He's just one of life's true gentlemen. Leaving Cheney, but with one last look back from the other direction. We follow through the through the forest up through Marshall Canyon. So there's a coal mine in Marshall Canyon, not in the real world, but certainly in my modelling world there is. And we head round a bend again, and now we're coming up the slopes of Marshall Canyon and heading into Spokane. And what I've represented in Spokane is industries and a main yard, which is the main yard on the layout, Yardley Yard. So during an op session, Yardley Yard is a hub of activity, as you can appreciate. So we have, I think from memory, 5 locals are generated out of Yardley Yard. Not sure if I'm in focus or out of focus here. There's a significant amount of classifying that goes on here. I generally have a yard master and 2 switchers on duty here during an op session, and they'll see a turnover of a couple of hundred cars. And there's industries on both sides of the yard. In hindsight, and in that such a wonderful tool, in hindsight I would have had the yard here at the front and the industries behind, mainly for uncoupling reasons and things like that. Guys are always leaning in to do uncoupling. Inevitably things get crunched on the near the face here of the layout, but you got to live with that. That's how it is. And Yardley Yard goes through a stub bore. I'll just give you a sneak preview the other side, across the Spokane River. But again, I'll give you one more look back in at Yardley Yard. Before we move on. Okay, so back to the Spokane River. We leave Yardley Yard and we cross the Spokane River. We go through a little bit of scenery. This is still in the city of Spokane, obviously. That will be an engine service facility there, where you can see the grey concrete and some engines behind the trees. We have a Purina Mills, which is a dog food, animal food plant. Creates a fair bit of traffic. It has a dedicated unit train. Strangely enough, the unit train is called the Purina train. I'm really surprised about that. We go round another sweeping bend here. Small suburbs of Spokane. As we go, we'll go underneath a road overpass and through another stub wall. Now we come into the town, an industrial area of Mill Lakes. Which in a minute I'll give you a pan view from the opposite angle. So here's your pan view of the start of Mill Lakes from the opposite angle. We've got a small town as we come through the wall, but then we go into the industries of Mill Lakes. Now Mill Lakes is an abbreviation. It's Millwood on the far side of the main line and Lakes Road on the near side of the main line. And during an op session we have a Millwood switcher and a Lakes Road switcher. So they switch out opposite sides of the main line. Swinging round the main line here, we curve Now this was where the layout actually used to finish up until about 2 years ago. This is just past this highway overpass that's coming up here. Right there, east staging started. But I'm driven by having long runs, and I don't like coming out of staging and going straight into an industrial area. So I ripped out east staging, put it down below, which we'll get to soon enough. So it sits underneath this industrial area here. The lump of wood in the background is currently making do as the CXT, which is a concrete sleeper facility. So if you can have a look there, you'll see some concrete sleepers. In the background, just past where the tank cars are there's heading into there, in the background there is an interchange. So by that I mean the local from yard to yard will bring out lots of cars, drop them on the interchange, pick up the returns, and then a industrial switcher will switch out the Millwood area out of this interchange. Here I'm going to have a timber plant of some description, and also if you have a look, Google, such a wonderful tool. I'm going to model that Western State asphalt, and this CHS agrarium is actually the transition bridge. So this little section here pulls out because I'm going outside of the garage door now into a small shed that houses a helix. I'll just take a step back so you get the picture. Try not to show you too much of the clutter, but you can see there's the lower deck and the upper deck. Oh, yes, in the helix room. So I have two helixes on this layout. One you've already seen, and this is the second one, housed in its own little shed, for want of a better word. So we'll poke the camera in there. Trains come off the garage layout and cross there and start heading down 6-turn spiral, double track, housed in its own garage. Sorry, not garage, but you know what I mean. Hell, it's been a long day, boys and girls. Comes out the bottom, don't mind the mess. This is a, by the way, this is a removable section here, right there, and comes into east staging. So this journey now brings us to the opposite end of the UPBNSF JD. This is east staging. Again, similar to west staging, it is a 12-track staging yard. This staging has mostly 20-foot long staging tracks, so there is no real issues with regards to holding long trains during operating sessions. However, this yard in itself is actually split across two 6-track staging yards. On one side we have the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and on the other side we have the Union Pacific. Now the reason behind that on east staging is because geographically, if you follow the Union Pacific line that I represent, which is the old Spokane International line, it goes up into Canada. It goes at least Spokane and parallels the BNSF for some 100 miles, but then it heads north up into Canada, whereas the BNSF turns eastbound after Bonners Ferry and heads towards across the Montana and towards Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then into Chicago. So I have actually separated basically what we will call both the lines here into two separate 6-track staging yards. So what you're looking at here is pretty close to the throat of the staging yard. And you can see my potash train there is ready to go. As we go further down the yard, and like West staging, it swings around a bend to give me the length that I needed. And again, it is on the lower deck, so it follows along that back wall there. So last but not least, here we have returned to Boardman, where the Rogers Run branch line leaves Boardman and goes to the Portland General Electric power plant. I've simulated this branch line, and I've also included some industries which are now aptly located in the North Boardman area. So you can see the branch line swings around in front of the township of Boardman. And a nice sweeping curve past the Kenny Plastics factory, again named after one of my good American friends. Into North Boardman industrial area. There we have a limestone or a concrete powder plant. So limestone that comes out of the Cement West plant in Cheney, unit trains come down from there to this plant here and are secondary crushed and then turned into concrete powder. We also have Zen Chemicals, and we will also have a biofuels plant in this area here on that return loop. So in the middle of that is going to be a biofuels processing plant. So there'll be an unloading facility for all the grain that's in those wagons, and also tank trains will come in there to pick up ethanol. But out here on these two tracks here is the branch line that's going down to Portland General Electric. We'll follow that around now because it goes around behind the backdrop. Something I haven't spoken about yet, but is this branch line is actually removable, so it rolls out of the way when I don't have operating sessions, and so I can get cars into this house garage. I'll give you a little bit of insight into that in a minute. This particular curved trestle here was on a previous layout, and it was too nice to not to use again, so I'm hoping to build a nice gulch type scene around that. And the branch goes down again, another return loop, which will be the power plant. So coal coming from the Cheat River coal mine on the layout way back near Yardley Yard in Marshall Canyon comes to this power plant. That now concludes Well, that concludes our journey of the JD. I hope you've enjoyed your 40 to 45 minutes of time touring my layout. It has been interesting trying to put this together, and I still have to go to the editing room now and cut out all the bits that were pretty ordinary, which I'm sure there were quite a few. But the reality is, thank you for participating in this. I'd like to take special note and thank Martin Jenkins, who has been the superintendent of this particular process for the live streaming. And I've been working with Martin in the background, and another gentleman called Brad Anderson from Lismore in New South Wales, with a view to trying to live stream our NMRA meetings and probably a lot more going forward to get broader exposure of the NMRA out there to people. So I hope you've enjoyed this journey. It's been interesting putting this DVD or pre-DVD together. Has been quite challenging, but I hope it gives you a bit of a snapshot as to my layout and my modelling of, or should I say my N-scale representation of the old washi line, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey. Thank you.